Throughout this journey from entrepreneur to mother and entrepreneur, which some people call mumpreneur, I've had to redefine myself. I think that's the biggest thing is that you come into motherhood knowing that you're going to change, and yet you're not really fully prepped and prepared for it because there's nothing on the internet, nobody's speaking about it, about the really deep, dark changes that you go through. And you see a lot of highlights over social media about how brilliantly beautiful motherhood is. And it is, 100%. But there's some really deep, dark times, and you're going through things that sometimes your other half or partner or people around you don't understand. And I think that was the biggest transition for me, is realizing I had to redefine myself over and over and over again. And then also I had to be okay with goals changing, and like my timeline for everything changed.
Welcome to the Soul Sesh podcast, where we dive into deep and soulful conversations with guests from all around the world about what it means to live a fully expressed and free life. I'm your host, Aaliyah, and I'm so excited to go on this journey with you. So let's dive in. Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to another episode of Soul Sesh. And I am so excited about today's conversation with a dear sister, friend, former client of mine, Aneesa Janering. She is, I'm like getting chills just like leading into this conversation because I have been blessed to witness your journey for about almost the last 2 years.
Yeah.
We started working together in 2021, and it's just been such a beautiful honor to just like witness your growth and your blossoming over these last 2 years. So Aneesa is a certified coach and brand designer. She has a very strong goal to help women find and honor their creative spark while building profitable and sustainable businesses. And I know that this conversation is going to be so inspiring for so many women. Aneesa is a new mom. She has been on the entrepreneurial journey for over 8 years.
Yeah.
And we're going to dive into Aneesa. I really want to begin by talking about this transition that you've been experiencing in your life over these last 13 months with your baby girl.
Yeah.
And this very huge transition in your life of moving from entrepreneur to mother and entrepreneur, and really juggling this massive transformation in your life as you've begun this journey of motherhood. So let's start there. Let's talk about what this journey into motherhood has been like for you, and how you've been playing with the entrepreneurial journey, or how it's affected the entrepreneurial journey for you as you've made this big transition.
First of all, I want to say thank you so much for having me on the podcast, and I'm really happy to be here. So my baby girl was born in March 2022, and before that she was due towards April. So she came 3 weeks early, which threw me off completely. And since then, it's been a complete whirlwind. I think throughout this journey from entrepreneur to mother and entrepreneur, which some people call mumpreneur, and that, with that title, I've had to redefine myself. I think that's the biggest thing, is that you come into motherhood knowing that you're going to change, and yet you're not really fully prepped and prepared for it because there's nothing on the internet, nobody's speaking about it, about the really deep, dark changes that you go through. And you see a lot of highlights over social media about how brilliantly beautiful motherhood is. And it is, 100%. But there's some really deep, dark times, and you're going through things that sometimes your other half or partner or people around you don't understand. And I think that was the biggest transition for me, is realizing I had to redefine myself over and over and over again. And then also I had to be okay with goals changing, and like my timeline for everything changed. Nothing sticks anymore. I mean, I'm lucky if I show up to meetings on time with just like not having like rushed the last 5 minutes. Everything's, like all over the place. And I have to be okay with that I am literally surviving and thriving in different areas. I've also had to remind myself countless times that I am powerful and I'm doing something really important. So, as an entrepreneur, my journey started May 2016. And I started as a VA. I then moved into OBM work and business management. And then I went into tech. And all along, I was brand designing, website designing, really in the creative space. And I got to a place where when I got pregnant, I was redefining the business again because I had done so many years of working as a done for you service provider. I was moving more into a coaching creative space. And I thought I had it all figured out. And that was definitely not the case. Once Ellie came, I was completely thrown for six. I just didn't understand who I was anymore. I didn't understand what the business, how that kind of like all worked together. My sole focus was taking care of my child.
Mm.
And so throughout this journey, I've had to really remind myself that I am doing something super important. I'm raising a human. And like what could be more important than that? And so all along the business was my baby, and I had to learn to give that up a little bit and to say it doesn't look exactly how I want it to look, but that's okay because this beautiful little girl is growing and she's depending on me and she's looking at me and I am doing something very important. So I think
Mm.
that's how everything's changed for me, is that I went into entrepreneurship so sure of myself. I went into motherhood completely not sure of myself, and that's okay.
That is so powerful. And it really speaks to the edges that we meet when we are going through transition, and our mind can stay so fixed on like, this is what it needs to look like, or I have a plan, and then life happens as it does and completely throws us for a whirlwind. And so I'm curious, in those moments when, let's start here. What did it look like for you? Like before Ellie came and I recall that you were like setting goals for how
Mm-hmm.
it was going to look like after Ellie came, and working through the vision of your brand and everything. And then she came and reality
Yeah.
hits, and it's like in those moments of just confusion or darkness or who am I? What was going through your mind at that point?
So my husband and I go for a walk every single day. Since Ellie was born, we always do this. This is our time together where we are not working, we're not in parent mode, we're just pushing a pram and we're talking to each other. And what I started finding was that every conversation that we had was me talking about how confused and how upset and frustrated with the world I was. It got
Mm.
to a place where our walks became negative because I was just constantly in this, what I would look at as a pit, and it looked dark and it looked like it was so far down and I just couldn't get out of it. I knew that I was being a good mom and I was giving all my resources to Ellie, but I also knew that my business wasn't where I wanted it to be. The brand didn't feel consistent anymore to myself. I just wasn't creating content. I wasn't happy. I was always trying to reinvent the business. And I found that I was, like, to answer the question, is that I was constantly in go, go, go mode, trying to figure out what was wrong with the business. Why was it failing? Why wasn't it where I wanted it to be? Why wasn't I able to be this mom that did it all? And
Mm.
what I have come to realize now is that I was going through a transition of almost grieving for who I was because I had these ideas, and I was not allowing myself to grieve enough to heal. I was just constantly grieving, just grieving. And so now I look back and I realize that what was on my mind was that I was failing. And that's all I could see, was that I was failing.
Wow. You touched on something so important, which I think that oftentimes we don't even realize is that we're constantly in a process of grieving our former selves, especially when we're going through big transitions in life. And like you touched on, it's like maybe we don't know what grieving looks
Mm-hmm.
like, but it can be that constant feeling of disappointment or
Yeah.
frustration or I wish things were different.
Mm-hmm.
So that I just really wanted to highlight that because it's so important. And I love what you said about just giving yourself that permission to grieve this former version of you,
Yeah.
because yeah, like she got you here to this point and now you have Ellie and like your whole life is ahead of you. But it is important to take that time to be like, wow, there was a thank you to my former self. Like, thank
Yeah.
you for bringing me here. Thank you for all of your really big dreams. And it's not about saying no to those dreams, but it's like what's actually now feeling aligned
Exactly.
because I've changed.
Yeah.
Um, so what did you do then after realizing, okay, I'm not where I want to be. Things are not feeling good. I also, something that came to mind too, is you said, wanting to, some, something to paraphrase, but something about like wanting to have it all in your business
Mhm.
and as a mom. And I wonder, like, we see that so much on
Yes.
Instagram of like you can
Exactly.
have it all, like
Yeah.
be the best mom and like a thriving $1 million business. And like,
Yeah.
yeah, I believe that that's possible. Like you can have it all, but it doesn't mean that it's all going to happen all at once or it's all going to happen now or whatever. So just like interesting to notice the ways that our mind can really attach to stories or like highlight reels that we see on social media. But on your journey, what was it like for you realizing this or going through this grieving process and then realizing that you wanted to make a shift? How did you transition yourself?
So just to roll it back a little bit to what you said about social media, what I realized, and actually my husband pointed out to me, is that I was scrolling a lot because I had a lot of downtime. I was, feeding my child. I was taking care of her. She was on my chest constantly. So I always had my phone scrolling, 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 consuming. And he actually said to me that I'm watching a lot of videos about motherhood. So I'm being pushed by social media platforms videos of those videos of mom saying that you can have it all, and look at me, I've had 3 kids and I've built a 6-figure business, and I was essentially taking all of that in and saying, well, why not me? What is wrong with me? And there was one story in particular that I actually went to my husband. I was crying and I was like, well, she did it, like, why can't I do this? And it turns out that that person in particular then later on said she had help. She has a village behind her helping her take her baby off her hands for a few hours. I didn't have that, and I didn't have any help except for my husband. So I was comparing myself to people that weren't me, wasn't my situation. And so while I was going through this process of understanding that I was grieving, and actually I was wanting to be that strong, independent woman that I was pre baby coming on board, I realized that I was also consuming so much of what the world told me I should be doing and what I should be like, that I wasn't actually paving my own way. And so
Mhm.
what I realized is I was also being a cookie cutter mom to Ellie because I wanted to work and I wanted to be a mom. And I was like, okay, well, she needs to fit into this schedule and she needs to eat this time. And this is when she needs to go to bed. And actually, what I realized is none of that worked for us. So while I was grieving, talking to Hugo constantly, it was actually one day where I was out for a walk with him and I realized I actually don't want to talk about this anymore. Like this is getting to a point where it's just negative and it feels negative and we feel restricted by this almost like lack of something that um we're trying to like determine what that is. So I basically had a walk with him and we just talked about everything else but like the weather, the birds. We literally said we will not talk about anything work related. And I got back home and I took a shower and I said to myself, I've got to do better. Because if I'm in this phase of grieving, I'm not allowing myself to heal. And the healing process is where I'm actually going to be a better person. I'm going to get out of this funk. I'm going to, be a better mom, a better wife, a better person to myself, to those around me. So I just kind of kicked myself in the butt and said, well, this is what needs to happen. Um, but it didn't happen like, I realized I was grieving and then I healed the next day. It was like this was going on for, I think, for 4 or 5 months where I was just in this dark hole. And then I finally started to realize I am very self-aware. So I kind of figured I need to get out of this. And how am I going to do that? And that's where we were.
Mm. Wow, I can really relate in my own way with the scrolling and comparison on social media. That has taken me down such dark holes as well of feeling not enough,
Hmm.
feeling like things aren't happening fast enough, comparing, just that constant comparison. Do you have any advice specifically on that, on the comparison piece? And we'll break apart the rest of what we're talking about. But I'm curious about your thoughts on comparison in particular, because you went through that sounds.
I
How
think
can, yeah, go ahead.
I think that it's very easy to go through comparison because we're always trying to be better than what we are right now. As human
Mm,
beings, we're always going on to the next thing and the next thing. And when you achieve that, you go on to something else. It doesn't always have to be big, it can even be small little steps, but we're always on to the next. And I think that comparison with social media is so easy because everyone shows up as their best self. We're literally taught to do that, right? Like you show up as your best quality photos, your best reels, your best, all of those things has to be perfection. So I think the one advice I'd have is that comparison is sometimes inevitable, but it's finding a way to ground yourself that you can realize that you are in comparison mode. And I think giving yourself grace that it's allowed. Okay, I can compare myself a little bit, but I also need to realize that I am powerful and I'm like nobody will empower you more than you can empower yourself. So I
mm,
think it's just having a tool. So for me, it was journaling. When I started reading back my journal, I realized that I was fully in comparison mode. I was being negative. I was, self like doubting myself. And I was doing a lot of negative talk within my journal to myself. And so in reading that back, that was like another check and balance of, okay, hold on a second. You're in the hole, get yourself out. So I think that it is having a tool, whether that is talking to someone, confiding in someone special, hiring a coach or whatever it is, journaling. Sometimes I write notes on my computer just because digital is faster for me. Just having an outlet that you can then go back and check yourself and say, actually, I'm in comparison. I'm going to allow myself that grace, but it needs to stop. And how
mm.
you stop that could either be taking a social media detox, deleting a platform altogether, removing the people from your list that is causing that comparison. It doesn't mean that you don't respect them. It doesn't mean that you don't believe in what they're doing. It just means for this phase of your life, you need to kind of distance yourself from whatever thoughts are causing the comparison. So that's what I
Mm.
would say.
Love it. Absolutely love it. I've taken many of those approaches myself in terms of journaling and taking social media detoxes. That's actually a regular practice for me now. I don't feel, I mean, I was going to say I don't feel that comparison as much, and I'm like, actually that's not true.
Yeah.
Like I feel like the
Well,
waves always come.
yeah.
It's like it's not like it's an automatic response like you said.
Yes.
It's very normal human behavior. But like you said, knowing how to manage that, and for
Mhm.
me a lot of that is just being really mindful about my time on social media,
Yeah.
knowing why I'm going on there. And yeah, I go on sometimes to scroll or whatever, and that's fine. But yeah, just having that intention behind it
Yeah.
is super helpful, and removing yourself from those spaces when you need it.
Yeah, and I don't know, I wanted to mention one other thing. I don't know if the same goes for Android phones, but with iPhones, of course, we have screen time, and that's in our settings. So I make it a point that every weekend when I'm doing my Sunday plan for the week, I actually look at my previous week and what time I've spent on my devices and where I've spent that. And sometimes I'll see like my averaging is like 3, 4 hours a day on social media. And I'm looking at it like, okay, but what did I get out of that? Where did that
Mm,
time go? I don't even know what I've done on social media. And so I think it's just having those checks and balances as well to know where your time's going, like you're saying, just always
yeah.
constantly being mindful of that.
I love that. Actually, another thing that I found really helpful, I downloaded this app called Off Time. It's like
Okay.
$1 on the App Store, and it blocks whatever apps you want it to block from whatever time periods that you want. So I was noticing myself that my most detrimental time on social media was in the evenings,
Yeah.
when I would just like, I'd be done work. I'm like kind of in that in between
Hmm.
space, and I just scroll, and then it's just like lost in
Yeah.
scrolling. And that's when the comparison would really come. So this app has been helpful for me because it blocks it from like, I have it set 6 p.m. to 8 a.m., no social media.
I love
And
that.
it's just an easy way to like automatically, it's just, and I know you love systems.
Yeah.
So that was like a little mini system for me. That's like,
Yeah, I've
okay, I
just
don't even
written
have to
that
think
down.
about it.
Yeah.
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 It's like whatever you can do to help yourself out, right? So I love
Yeah.
these little tips. So you got to this place that you're like, all right, I need to make a change. I need to do something different. What does it look like for you now? Like, where are you? How are you feeling about business slash motherhood and balancing this, like these two huge
Yeah.
responsibilities, but also gifts in your life?
I feel like it's important to understand and to acknowledge that no 2 days will look alike, and that's okay. And I think that one other thing that I kept doing to myself was that there's a lot of like one method parenting advice on the internet. It's like, your child should sleep at this time and have these naps and these, like, it basically dictates how you should parent. And actually, it's exactly like entrepreneurship. You want to build a business that works for you. It's the exact same thing with parenting for me. It's now we have such an amazing schedule where we have no strict schedule, but we know what we want to accomplish in the day. So, like Ellie will get up at 6:30 with me and we'll have breakfast and then we'll play and we'll go out to the park and we'll get nature in, rain, winter, it doesn't matter, like we're out there. And we come back in, we have lunch, and then I get a few hours to work because she goes down for a nap. And then we get up and we all have dinner together as a family. I know so many families that don't have dinner together all together. And it's like we make it a point. And so I think now I'm in this phase of I'm going with the flow, but with intention. And I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's like I have this intention for the day of what I would like to achieve with her, with myself, with the business, with Hugo. And I actually figure out a way to factor that in. But I don't put the pressure on myself of like, it must look exactly like this. Like sometimes our sit down dinners are like us on the go, but we're eating together and we're like busy doing stuff. There's times where work will look like I would say, okay, I want to work within 3 and 4 p.m., but actually it looks like 8 and 9 p.m. And I actually get a lot more creativity done because my brain has stopped being mum mode. So I think that it's important to understand that things will change and be okay with that change. And I'm thriving with it.
I love this so much. What it really sounds like to me is an intuitive approach to life. And, it's like, again, I have so many parallels with what you're saying on my entrepreneurial journey, where for so long I was really stuck in feeling like it had to look a certain way. Like I need to be behind the computer working for like these amount of hours. I need to have like my content like calendar, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just like all of these rules. And I can imagine for motherhood too, that it's like it's got to be this way or that way, and like all of these like strict regimes. And it's like, says who? Says
Exactly.
who?
Exactly.
We get to decide. And I love that you're taking this like very flowing but intentional approach to all aspects of your life. And it sounds like motherhood was the catalyst to really inviting this way of life in.
I feel like motherhood breaks you down to your raw core, and then it
Mm,
allows you the ability to build yourself back up the way you want to build yourself back up. I feel,
mm,
and I know that you and I have had this conversation before. I feel that like before motherhood, up I'm a, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm basically all parts of all the people that have come before me and are in my life and all of their influences. So before motherhood, I was like what my mom would say, or what my dad did, or what my sister and my brother would think, or what my community would think, or in laws, or, or like what I'm trying to um, become in the entrepreneurial space. And so with motherhood, I feel like that strips you of all of that And then you get to build yourself back up with the learnings and the teachings that you choose to have, because you're now passing it down onto another little human. So
Mm.
it's one of those things where motherhood has been the catalyst for my rebirth, but it's also been the catalyst for my growth, and I would say like regrowth. But it's like I became a seedling again, and now I'm becoming the flower that I want to become. So
Oh, that
yeah.
is so beautiful. And do you find that Ellie is like a big motivation behind your business?
she is she is the reason why I'm happy with slow progression, because I actually feel that when I look at her, I'm like, that's where my time is going. And in doing
Oh.
that and being okay with that, opportunities are coming to me that I'm not asking for. Money is coming to me. Like, I'm finding that I'm so abundant right now, whether it's time, money, space, freedom, creativity, all because when I look at her, she's a constant reminder that it's okay to have slow growth. It's okay to be in the moment. And it's like, I have to say that when she goes to the playground and she experiences something for the first time, she turns around, she says, Mama. It's like, can you imagine if I was looking at my phone and I wasn't present with her? So
Mm.
I just think that she is, yes, definitely my reason, my why. Yeah.
Oh, that is so beautiful, Anissa. Oh my gosh. I just feeling that deeply.
Thank you.
It's so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Like, we have more to say on all of this, but I just want to say thank you for your vulnerability and sharing your story because, like we've talked about, I feel like it's very common, or like a lot of people wouldn't talk about these darker moments of being a mom. Like, maybe there's guilt or even entrepreneurship of like your business having not been where you wanted it to be at a
Hmm.
certain point. And there's no shame in that. I've experienced that too. It's like, the more that we can hear these stories and hear truth,
Yeah,
vulnerable, courageous truth from other people, it gives us permission to also embrace these moments of uncertainty.
absolutely.
Um, so, what would your advice be for someone who, I feel like a lot of people right now are in that space of uncertainty,
Hmm.
of whether they're moms or not, just not knowing what the future holds or like where to move in their life? What are some of your advice for someone who's in that space of dealing with uncertainty?
I would honestly say, and this is something that I have learned, it's not something that's just inbuilt, is that be okay with redefining yourself. Like, if something
Mm,
isn't working, try something else. Life is too short to just kind of be like, I'm stuck, right? So, one of the things, and you know this about me, is that I'm not afraid to pivot. Okay, this business idea isn't working, let's go into something else. Or, this brand feels stale for me, let's move on. Or just whatever it is, if I need to learn a skill, go out and learn it, take some time and learn it, rather than whinge about it and say that I don't know something. And I think with uncertainty, you could very easily put yourself in that hole and be like, I can't get myself out. But there are always, every single day, a few steps that you can take to getting to the next day and figuring out that day and the next day. And you'll find that after a few days, you're like, okay, but I'm not so dark as where I was, because I keep moving
mm,
forward. And I think that's a big, big, big thing, is that find something that helps you move forward, whether that is just taking on a mini project, going out into nature, just taking time away from the issues, or, the uncertainty. But finding a reason to keep moving forward little by little, and don't be afraid to pivot.
mm. I honestly, I love your approach to experimentation and change. It's like, I feel like you are like, okay, like I'm feeling called to try something new. I'm just going to try it. And there's no, or maybe there is behind the scenes, but at least from the outside looking in, it doesn't seem like there's much of that like overthinking or what are people going to think or what does this mean? Like, it just, I love that you just try new things and you experiment.
I feel like in life, certainly I was always told that when you pick something, you stick with it. So, you
Mm,
picked a major in school, you're sticking with that because you've picked it. I've always been someone who's like, if I don't like something or if I get bored, I'm out and I'm going to the next thing and I'm going to figure out that next thing. Um, and I do feel like with me as an adult now, that has really come into like my motherhood and entrepreneurship, where I'm like, if something isn't working, why am I going to be miserable and talk about it over and over and over again and not do anything to make it better? Because
Mm,
I am the curator of my life. So I can go and actually create the life that I want to. And to other people, and I've said this on my social as well, is that to other people, it might look like inconsistency sometimes, but it's not necessarily inconsistency if you're moving forward and progressing every single day.
yeah.
It's consistency of progress.
And I think inconsistency in and of itself is just such a like myth
Hmm.
because we have, first of all, we have seasons to our lives. We're not meant to always be on like, our society is so obsessed with, this 24-hour, like we got to show up the
Yeah.
same way and do the same thing every single day. And that it just does not work,
No.
especially for women. We are cyclical. And the other thing about it too is that I think we forget that we're spiritual beings that and like time is not linear.
Yeah.
Like we're not moving in like this constant progression all the time. And in fact, growth is very circular.
Hmm.
So while it might look like, like leaving something to start something new, it's like you're never starting from scratch.
No.
You're
No.
always taking former experience with you. And it's not meant to be like this, like, okay, this step one, step two, step three, like this linear
Exactly.
thing.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
so freeing.
And that's the
Yeah.
thing. I think that with so being in that place of uncertainty, if you're constantly moving in a forward position, like I said, that could literally be like, today I don't feel like it, but I'm gonna go for a walk, I'm gonna get out into nature. I'm not saying like you have to have a goal that you've accomplish every day towards another bigger goal. I'm saying like, if you take time out from that uncertainty and say that I'm going to do something today that to make me a little bit better, to make me feel better, whether that's changing my mood, my environment, my clothing that I'm wearing, whatever it is, it's just doing one small step every single day will help get you out of that uncertainty. Because I do think that inconsistency is this buzzword that's all over social media of like, if you're inconsistent, you're nowhere, you're gaining nothing. And I disagree with that. I've been so inconsistent with my business. I have been in like terms of inconsistency. I have been inconsistent with the way that I parent. And actually, I'm doing a bang up job. I'm doing a really, really good job with both of them. So I think that inconsistency has to be understood for what it is, and it's just a buzzword to get people
I
to fit
couldn't.
into a schedule.
Yes, I can't agree more with that. And for anyone who's like curious about human design too, there are in human design, my understanding of it is that there are people who are consistent like in their design, and maybe for them it's a little bit easier to, I don't know what that looks like because I'm inconsistent,
Yeah.
like in my human design. So
Yeah.
I don't actually know what that consistent model looks like, but it was so permission giving for me when I learned that, not that we need the permission from a system like human
Yeah.
design, but just to hear that, like, yeah, we're not meant to necessarily all be the same way. We're
Hmm.
definitely not meant to be the same way. So giving yourself that grace. And I think a really big undertone of our conversation has been celebrating slow growth.
Yeah.
And in fact, really looking at slow growth as a beautiful way to like move through life, because it's so easy to get caught up in like those quick successes or
Yeah.
like these big wins. But it's, as you said, it's like the little shifts every day compound over time and
Yeah.
completely radically change your life.
Yeah.
So we can definitely begin small if
Yeah,
if we're
exactly.
feeling like we're in a place where things aren't where how we want them to be.
And what I sometimes tell my own clients is that actually take that big thing that you're uncertain about and break it down into all the granular bits. What does it take to get to that big goal? Sometimes we compound how big that goal is or where, what we envision for our life, that actually we think that we're so far off from that mark and it feels like it's unattainable. And when you break it down granularly, you can see that actually I'm another step there. I've done that actually. I've achieved that. I'm moving forward. And that's what I had to do with the business. It's like it was this big, massive, unachievable thing that I was trying to build. And actually, when I broke it down granularly, I'm like, well, I've got that. I've got that. I've got that. I've got moving pieces. I'm getting there. I'm just not there yet. And so I think that it's just important to understand that concept as well.
Yes, beautiful. So I'm curious, as a mom, as an entrepreneur, mompreneurship, is that what you
Mumpreneur?
said? People,
Yeah.
mompreneur?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cute. What does self-care look like for you these days?
Whew. Um, to be honest, self care for me personally looks like having the ability to like appreciate a cup of coffee. And
Mm,
I don't get any other forms of self care right now. It is just my husband and I taking care of Ellie, and with she had some health concerns, so it is all on us. Um, so I don't have like the time away from her. I'm with my child 24/7. I sleep next to her. I wake up next to her. I'm with her all day long. Um, so when I do have little breaks like this, like for example now, I'm enjoying this. This to me is self care because
mm,
it's time away. It's doing something I want to do with like being here on the podcast, and then in the morning it's literally 10 minutes that my husband has her, and I get to have my coffee by a window and let some sunlight in. That's my self care. I know
yeah.
that it'll get better, but for now, that's okay with me.
Yeah, beautiful. These little and I love that for anyone who is like a new mom or super busy, or maybe you have like a 9 to 5 and you want to start your own thing as well and time is really limited. It's like these little pockets
Yes.
of presence and intention can go a really long way.
Yeah. I do feel that being intentional, like you said, the word intention, and that is what it is. It's being intentional with your time, being intentional with the moment. It's like, okay, so I could easily down a cup of coffee and go on to the next thing because we have a very busy morning, right? But instead, it's just taking that pause and being like, okay, I just want to enjoy this cup of coffee because I know what's coming next. And I think that's what it is being intentional with the moment.
Mm, it's beautiful. What has been the most surprising thing for you in motherhood?
Um, I would say it's the amount of information that you're not given at the beginning. So there's a lot of articles out there, a lot of blogs, there's so much resource out there on the internet about what motherhood is going to be like. And I genuinely think that there's such a gap in that information about actually what happens during motherhood, about
Mm,
how you navigate, how like postpartum depression doesn't look like postpartum depression what they show you on social media. It could be very um deep dark down, and you don't know what's happening to you. There's not enough information about what to do when your child isn't fitting into all of the milestones that they have, or just a misinformation or misrepresentation of the information that would really help. So that has been really eye-opening for me, that when I feel something's off, or when I need help, or when I feel like, okay, this isn't going to plan, it's be relentless about asking questions. Just
mm,
keep going back for more, whether you're asking someone tangible or you're asking the internet or whatever it is. Just keep looking for that information, because usually mother's intuition, something's up. Um, and then the other thing that I would say is how much of yourself you have to give to another human being. I know that like with motherhood, you understand that you're in charge of this human being and nurturing and loving them, but it's how much of yourself that goes into this person. And sometimes you don't have enough for yourself. So
mm.
it's a lot of like, what surprised me was how much of myself went into Ellie and how much of myself I gave, to all the things that needed to happen for her. But at the end of the day, you also have to do that self care. You have to do that inner love work, because if you don't, you'll just lose yourself. And then you're in this hole of like not knowing who you are anymore. And I think that's really, really important to know going into motherhood.
Mm. It's so important, and as you said, like it even sounds like your daily walks with Hugo, having this like safe space with your husband
Oh yeah.
to talk about what's on your heart and to go into those dark places was a form of self-care. Like
Yeah.
that is self-care. Just finding these portals of safety, I think, is so key, because if we hold it all in or we
Oh yeah.
try to like be what the world wants us to be, then like we're constantly shrinking ourselves.
Yeah. I think it's very important to have someone to talk to. And that
Yeah.
could be anyone that you trust 100% and you love and adore, and like that they have that care back for you. I think that having the right person to talk to
Mm.
is really, really key, because the reason why I chose Hugo is not because he was my husband, but because he's my best friend. And that has always been our foundation. Um, and he will tell me when I'm being too hard on myself, or when I'm being out of line with him, or with, with Ellie, or with anybody. Um, he's very, very good at putting me in my place, which is great, because sometimes you need that. And I think one of the biggest things is that he didn't always tell me what I wanted to hear. He told me what was necessary and what was important and what was almost like triggering, but at the same time important for me to hear that, you know what, I need to slow down. I don't need to make six figures tomorrow morning, you know? And he would ask the hard questions of like, well, where does that come from? Where's that goal coming from? Why is that important to you? Okay, if that's that important to you, let's make it happen. But if it's not important, why are you stressing? And so I think it's very important to have someone that is going to ask you the hard questions, loves you, and will care and nurture you, and will give you that safe space, but at the same time kind of put a thumb in it and be like, hey, you know what, actually you're being too hard on yourself, pull you back up.
Mm. Beautiful. I love that. I love Hugo so much. Hugo, if you're listening, we're a big fan.
Yeah, I'm a big fan.
It's so important to have that safe space to go to, as you said.
Yeah.
We're not meant to go through this life alone. And it reminds me something that I've heard recently of, back in like, I don't know, centuries ago, the way that parenting would work was in community. It
Mhm.
wasn't just left on like the mom or the dad or like one or two
Yeah.
people to care for this being. It was like there was a whole tribe
Yeah,
that's supporting the growth of like this new generation. And we don't really have that in our society. It's like that's not even a thing, that's not valued or looked at. But it's just so important to find your people and to find
exactly.
people that are going through or have been through something similar, or that you can just trust and hold that space for you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm.
Hmm.
Is there anything else that you want to share with new moms or entrepreneurs who are just feeling a little bit disconnected or lost, or just, feeling like they're not where they want to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, love you all, because I think that's important to say. But no, I seriously think that figuring out how your business works for you is very, very important. It's not about how it works for your clients, or, your clients' clients, or your referrals, or your audience. It's about how it works for you. Business looks different to everyone when they're in a different season. So as a
Mm.
new mom, or mums of, many kids, or whatever it is, figure out how business works for you, or if it works for you at all in the moment. And I think that was one of the things that I had to understand is, for the first 6 months I couldn't work, and I didn't work. I kept beating myself up that I wasn't working. But once I actually realized that this is the season where business doesn't look right on me, and then when it did, it came in like that, and the creativity came back, and I felt a flow of things. So I think it's just making sure that business works for you. And if it does, figure out a model, a process that works best with you. Um,
Mm.
yeah, that's the one thing I would say for juggling entrepreneurship and motherhood. It has to work
Mm.
for you and your baby.
Yes. There's another. there's another, like, to pivot a little bit, there's something, another topic that I want to explore with you, because
Mhm.
you are a highly creative person. You have in the past, you had your own design shop, you were making earrings and
Yeah.
like ceramics and stuff. And you have been for a long time doing branding work, and you used to make websites, and just so much like creative juice in you. And I'm curious to hear, how do you cultivate, or how would you recommend for another creative or coach to cultivate that sense of creativity within themselves and to really bring that creative spark to life?
I would say taking inspiration from absolutely everything around you. It's not about just going out and smelling flowers. It If that doesn't work for you, that doesn't work for you. But it could literally be, the lamp behind you, or the what you're watching on TV, or what you're scrolling and you see something. I screenshot everything. Like, I have 5,000 screenshots in my phone, like, categorized, because I just screenshot everything that I see. I take a picture of everything I see. I have a Pinterest board. I organize my life like that, because I'm systems. I love my systems. But it's just taking inspiration from absolutely everything. And then over time, when you have this repository of information and, like, discoveries, you will actually start to see a theme and a trend of what works for you. And I think I do that a lot with my branding clients as well. Is like, take it just for a week. Take a bunch of screenshots of what you're seeing, what really intrigues you. Take pictures of what you see outside in the world, and cultivate it into a specific space. And you'll see that there's themes that start to emerge of what creative creativity looks like to you. So
Mm.
actually, at the beginning of when Ellie was born, my creativity was shot. I didn't have any. I was struggling. I didn't know how to be creative. And then one day I needed to sew something for her on one of her onesies. And I bought an embroidery kit, and I just took a few of, like, pins to fabric, and I fell in love with it. I was like, "Oh my god, this is amazing. I'm creating a shop. This is what I'm going to do." So I learned embroidery for 2 weeks, and now I embroider all of her, like, little onesies and her t-shirts, and I absolutely love it. I didn't do the shop because I think that was a bit too sporadic. Let's do that. But it was that little thing that I then took inspiration from, and I was like, "Oh my god, I can be creative with something new." And when I actually went back to, like, my Pinterest board, for example, I found that the things that I was embroidering were florals, and you can see that all through my Pinterest board, is that I took inspiration from florals. I love it. So it all means something. So I think that,
Mm.
to answer your question, is that take inspiration from every single thing. Find inspiration, um, take photos, and then look back at it at the end of the week and be like, actually, wow, I had an amazing week, and it allows you to a moment of gratitude. And B, it also shows you, where you're pulling your creativity from, because the things that you
Mm.
notice are the things that keep you creative.
And what about if, so you have this creative inspiration, you like have clarity on, like, I love this vibe or this
Mhm.
aesthetic or these colors or whatever. What if, like, the translation of that for someone doesn't look the way that they want it to look? I've had this experience multiple times where it's like the vision in my head is not what comes out.
Mhm.
Do you think at that point, like, try again, or just like post it, be done with it, continue to grow? Like, what's your approach on, if it's not really like what you envision it to be?
So I actually have that experience with my brand. I've changed my brand multiple times throughout the year because the vision, like you said, came through, but it didn't translate back onto social media or what I was trying to create. But I think that we all have to have the ability to make mistakes and to be okay with it being messy, because you're figuring yourself out. So let's just say, if you're a creative or a coach, or anybody in the service-based industry, or even just not even an entrepreneur, but you're looking to find that creative spark within, right? Allow yourself messy action in order to figure out where your creative spark comes from. How are you
Mm.
going to know that you like to create pictures of rocks with like pastels or like, or crayons, or how are you going to know that you like to do something and that it can be profitable in the long run because of your passion if you don't allow yourself to try different things?
Mm.
So I would say, if you have a vision, you feel very strongly on it, sit on it for a few days, you found your creative, like you're excited. And I think that's the big thing, is if you're excited about something, bring it to
Mm.
life. Even if it is just, low cost, low budget, bring something to life. Figure out if that's what you want to do or we want to post it, and then, there's always archive later down the line. But I would say messy action, 100%, because it allows
Mm.
you to be that creative, and also then to be the analytical thinker of, this didn't work. What happens next?
Mm. I love that so much. Again, so much permission to just authentically be yourself. And there's nothing wrong if it
Yeah.
doesn't like look the way that you want, or if it doesn't work out the way that you want initially, but that energy of experimentation again. That's
Yeah.
actually been something in my own life that I've really been like playing with even more. I read this book called Skip the Line by James Altucher, I believe. And he talks in there. Have you read the book?
No, no, I haven't.
Oh, yeah, it's really good, and he talks in there a lot about the power of experimentation. And he says that he defines experimentation as having to be something that's really easy to do, something that there's no downside. So
Hmm.
you either succeed or you learn something from it,
Exactly.
and something that you can like just get done, like do quickly. And
Hmm.
it's been so permission giving for me to play with this method of experimentation, because for me, it's really taken the pressure off as someone who can like go through big bouts of perfectionism or self-doubt. Like the quality of experimentation has been like, okay, I'm just trying something. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that I have to stick with it, or it doesn't mean that like this is who I am. It's not my identity. It's just something that I get to play with and just
Exactly.
try and see, like, do I like it? Did it feel good? What was the like, what is the engagement with this
Hmm.
thing? Not that that really matters, but what's, what was
Yeah.
it like to experiment with this offer or this creation or this
Exactly.
post or whatever it might be. So
I
I
think
love that.
I think we define creativity as being perfect online, and that's something that I'm totally against. I think creativity is messy. I think creativity is almost allowing your wild side out. Like, just experiment, throw things out there, put stuff out that, okay, if it flops, it flops. You know what? We'll figure out why it flopped and move forward. Um but I do think that I agree 100, well, I know I agree 100%, is that you're either learning or you'll succeed and get to what you wanted
Mm.
to do. And I think, like I said, creativity has to be messy, because it allows you that permission to just go out there, put your visions out there. You never know what will stick. You
Mm.
never do. Like, I mean, so I started that embroidery story, and I didn't create the shop. But then I had a client who I pitched randomly, just to say that, what if I embroidered your logo, the same logo that we just finished in your brand design? And it was like, oh my goodness, that is so cool. Like, where did that go? I didn't even know where that came from. And actually, she got, I embroidered her shirt and a cap for her. And so she has that in her brand photos now, and that's her thing. And like, she has her embroidered logo
That's
that
so
we just
cool.
designed. And I thought, if I hadn't of like acted upon that urge of like, I really want to learn embroidery, I couldn't have done that. And I'm really, really proud of that. So I think you have to allow yourself the messy action.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Aneesa. Where can people get to know you or connect with you, learn more about your work and all of that good stuff?
I'm predominantly on Instagram, so I'm at the Aneesa Janering. So on Instagram, and then my email is also www.theaneesajanering.com.
Amazing. All of Aneesa's info is going to be in the description bar below. Make sure you check her out. She's just a well of inspiration. And thank you so much for
Thank you
sharing
for
your
having
story
me.
and your journey. Is there
Thank you.
any last words that you want to share?
No, I think we've covered a lot.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I am just so excited to hear what people have to say about this episode. So make sure to share with us on social media, tag me and Aneesa, leave a comment or message us. Let us know what part of this really spoke to you. What part of this message did you need to hear? We'd love to hear that feedback. And just thank you again so much, Aneesa. I absolutely
Thank you.
loved having you.
Thank you for having me.